This week, policy problem. Across the nation, the debate over student cell phone use is resulting in district-wide bans and outright confiscation. Some schools reversing course while others stand their ground.
Teachers tell us how phones are disrupting classrooms and taking time away from learning.
The Vancouver School District following in their footsteps, announcing earlier this year that it would commit to a phone-free academic environment. River doubling down, phones in bins, boxes, and pouches as the discussion continues over the future of phone use in schools.
I feel that not all the students should have to do it. I think it should be on a case-by-case basis.
It's not increasing productivity how they thought it would.
We'll speak to River students who weigh in on their experiences with the new policy. Also, positive results. Neighboring districts are taking similar actions to limit students' access to cellular devices, which they report have been a success. But with the world as we know it increasingly reliant upon technological tools for communication, do restrictive phone policies pose a greater problem than they solve? Or are extreme measures such as outright bans necessary to fix what teachers are calling a growing attention deficit? Joining me for this week's Rapid Roundtable are Honors World Themes teacher Natasha Flack, sophomore students Evelyn Nulf and Sartu Gure, and IB English teacher Scott Binkley. And for insight and analysis on her recent article, Emmy McGill joins me on set to discuss her interview with VPS Superintendent Dr. Jeff Snell, who shared his thoughts on the digital debate that's charging up. Welcome to the conversation. It's the Rapids Report.
From CR News, this is the Rapids Report with Talan Collins.
And a good Friday afternoon. I'm Elijah Guerin, in for Talan, and thank you for joining us as we examine yet another critical issue that's challenging life here at River and in schools across the nation. It's no secret that cell phone and social media use has and will continue to have an effect on teens' mental health and educational experience, and consequently, the matter of specific policy addressing its use in the classroom has become a question of when, not if. Right here in Washington, restrictive cell phone guidelines, including some outright bans, have been increasingly appearing in districts across the state. Nearby Woodland School District, for example, recently enforced a new policy limiting cell phone use in classrooms and saw what it reported to be instantly positive results. Students were seen working through their assignments together instead of relying upon or being distracted by their phones. Back in September, WPS Superintendent Aisha Riley stated, "I actually walked our campus this week, and I did notice fewer kids had their hoods up." Riley adds it's, quote, "not about taking the phones away, it's about how to manage and utilize them in an effective way." In the case of our district, for now they are allowing each individual school to take their own approach. The Vancouver School of Arts and Academics, or VSAA, has implemented a rule that requires students to place their powered-down phones into hanging pouches whenever entering the classroom. For some time now, VSAA teachers have insisted cell phone use has grown to be more disruptive to their students' attention. VPS Communications Director Jessica Roberts commented on the school's decision, saying in part, quote, "For some time now, Vancouver has had policies that support limitations and oversight of phones on a school-by-school and classroom-based level. This year, VSAA made this choice to strengthen their oversight of cell phone use." At the start of this year, River also announced that they would be committing to a phone-free academic environment, and we've seen this aim enforced through a general policy of less leniency when it comes to cell phone use during class, as evidenced by many teachers requiring that students put their phones in bins or pouches until the end of the period. We spoke to some students here at River to get their thoughts of this new policy.
Some people who are actually good do put up their phones, but some people just either take up their phone out of their phone cases and then put their phone case up and keep their phone and keep playing on it during class.
And it's becoming a distraction because they are refusing to put their phone in the bin.
There have been a lot more disruptions from different students talking to their friends that are maybe next to each other.
People are kind of trying to sneak around onto their phones a little more and focusing more about sneaking onto their phones than actually doing the work.
The only issue I have is when they put it in the boxes and the boxes are far away from me. like on the opposite side of the classroom, because if there were a fire or some, because I mean it's a real thing to be worried about, like a fire, or like a shooting, or just like something.
So if a student can show that they can like work and keep their phone in their bag and not use it, then they shouldn't have to put it in the bin.
Some teachers have been going a little too far as to yell at their students who didn't put their phone in the box and were on it in class.
Some of my teachers make me put my phone in a bin and then have like a table again across the classroom.
The teachers who really understand how our brains work and how everything is are loosening up, because they know that it's not increasing productivity how they thought it would.
Another key aspect of cell phone use is the most frequently used part of it, social media. The technology, which has increasingly become a mainstay in younger people's lives, continues to present a serious challenge to students' learning both academically and socially. Fear of missing out, or FOMO, is a condition that has become all too common in teens using platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and the like. Many feel that their experience with FOMO has continuously worsened as social media forces its way into their lives. Teens say they feel the need to constantly know what's going on and what they're missing out on, always drawing them back to their phones. One massive issue of social media is the effect it can have on teens' mental health. Two heavy contributors to that is cyberbullying and false perception of life. Cyberbullying has been around as long as the internet has, and social media's prominence has certainly given an open invitation to it. Teens are able to be in constant contact with each other and post anything they want, leaving room for bullying. False perception of life is where teens will only see their peers living their best life in regard to looks and experiences, causing the teen to feel that their life is boring or not good enough by comparison. Others, however, insist that there are more positive aspects to social media than drawbacks, often citing ease and openness of communication as an example of its use as a tool. Now joining me for this week's Rapid Roundtable are Honors World Themes teacher Natasha Flack, IB English and Philosophy teacher Scott Binkley, and sophomore students Sartu Gura and Evelyn Nolth. We're going to start off with the students. So just ask students, how do you feel the phone policy has affected you?
I feel like at the start of the year, a lot of teachers were serious about it. Some weren't, some didn't see the point of it in their classes, which I feel like makes sense for some classrooms. But over time, I didn't really need to have to put my phone in a bin or in a locker because my teachers weren't reminding me. So it just felt like it returned to normal, like how it was last year.
Now it's just kind of like put it in your backpack and it's okay. I won't see it and it's fine.
How do you feel that the cell phone policy has affected your guys' work ethic?
I was definitely a student that didn't get the best grades last year because I was on my phone all the time. And now that teachers kind of are, if they see my phone, they'd take it away and maybe put it in the office. If they see it, it has definitely made me do my work a lot more because I'm not entertained by my phone in class.
For me personally, I don't think it's really affected my work ethic. I'm just so used to not pulling out my phone in class, and most of the apps I have on my phone require some sort of connection, and usually my phone does not have good connection, unfortunately. So it's I already have this thing getting in the way of me using my phone, so I just have no choice but to just work on work.
Ever since the cell phone policy has been in play, has classwork been turned in more on time, compared to last year, and has the work quality improved?
I find that I get a much higher turn-in rate with paper rather than on computer or digital work from students. And I do notice that more kids are finishing the assignment that I give them in the amount of time that I get to give them because the phones are in the bin. I do let kids get their phones out the last 5 minutes at the end of the period, and so maybe that's motivating them to finish up or something. But I've noticed a higher turn-in rate with classwork in class.
Yeah, I mean, students seem to be more productive in general during work time. I mean, it's one less distraction in the room. As far as quantifying it in terms of like whether, I mean, there are students who are still not turning in work, but the work time seems to be more productive. And even if it's not productive, it's kind of gratifying to see them maybe socializing with each other rather than just being isolated in their device.
In some of my classes, I've noticed that some people's phones have like gone missing, but then they'll appear back in the class later, like back in the bins. People have forgotten their phones a lot in the bins. That is definitely a big thing. In my math class, someone forgot their phone and didn't pick it up for like 2 days. I don't know how I could forget that because they were in class, but
It's definitely happened to me before where I've forgotten my phone in the bin, and then like either a period later or 2 periods later I'll like realize it because I'm supposed to put my phone in like another bin, and I'm like, oh my god, where's my phone? And it does make me scared for like there's just this anxiety, but honestly I'm not too worried about my things getting stolen here.
Again, for the students, if the cell phone policy wasn't established, do you think that you would have a different way of learning or a different way of going through school than you do now?
100%. Sometimes my friends will they'll like use my water bottle with the germ thing. Sometimes they'll like use my water bottle, they'll fill it up for me, and I'm like, where are you? I need my water bottle, I'm really thirsty. And they can just bring it back to my class. Or if I don't know where they are, or if there's work that they need, they can text me. They're like, oh, can you bring me this assignment? Because I'm not going to be here today. I think it's really helpful.
But do you need access to that phone during the class period?
For me, it makes me more comfortable, but I don't think I would need it by any chance. Putting it in the bins doesn't bother me at all. I have a laptop I can look things up on that has way better Wi-Fi than my phone.
I think I mentioned this before, but I don't feel like the rule is being enforced as it was at the start of the year. So my phone is just usually in my backpack instead of like in a bin, because like even though I know the rule still exists and I'm sure my teachers are aware of it, it's just that I'm not like given a reminder, so I don't feel the need to put my phone away.
So with me, I'm like, put your phone in the bin. Sometimes I forget. But as long as the phones are away, if they're in your backpack or the bin, it doesn't matter to me. But then I think because that expectation has been set, if I see a phone out, I'm like, oh, in the bin now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then on test days, I will, or a day if kids are like doing a presentation or something like that, I'll go around and really make sure. But I think once we've established that routine, I've noticed way fewer phones, even on days that I don't remind. And I know that not everybody has their phones in the bin, but I'm just like, oh, we're on to our thing, but the phones are away. And it's super obvious if one person has it out. And I think, it just sets that expectation. And it's nice because they're getting their work done in class and they're interacting with each other. And there's also less cheating. That's been another positive, because it's so easy to go just snap a picture and send it to a friend. But now if I'm stuck, instead of being snapping a picture of your thing, I don't have my phone. So I have to ask you, and then you have to help me with my math or something like that. You know what I mean? And so then that's more engagement.
Have you noticed that students are more focused and working harder during classes this year compared to last year?
This year, I definitely do notice a difference in some of my classes, but I don't know if that is because of the phone policy or just because I'm in different classes with different people around me.
The difference between my one honors class and my other classes are completely different. The way that kids socialize, do their work, the way that teachers act towards them. In my honors class, kids are so quiet and they actually are doing their work. And if they are not doing their work, they're on their phone being quiet. In my other classes, there's yelling, there's screaming. In my math class, again, which is my more rowdy, because it's right before lunch, my teacher had to put a roller whiteboard in between two kids so they wouldn't talk to each other. He's taken kids out of class and really given them a stern talking to, sent them away.
Do you think that would be better if they were to be on their phones?
When they were on their phones, they kind of just looked at their phones and then showed each other videos and laughed for a second. So they are a lot quieter, but now that they're socializing, but again, it's just seating arrangements as well. Maybe if they weren't sitting next to each other, it'd be different.
It's kind of analogous to my generation, when the TV generation, where parents would basically just use the television as a babysitter, right? And pacify young people with this technology. And it's similar, but I think this phone technology is way more destructive. There wasn't a lot of bullying happening on television. So there's a lot of things that are connected to this that aren't necessarily related to productivity in the classroom, but just sort of like healthy ways of like socializing and building communities. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. So at times it seems like, yeah, oh, if I just allow them to have their phones right now, maybe I'd get the productivity out of them that I want. Like, okay, you can listen to music or you can be on your phones, just make sure you're working, but the harm is still being done. So having a little bit louder classroom because kids are actually talking to each other and communicating with each other is definitely a sacrifice that I'm willing to make, because it just seems like at the end of the day, it's going to do more good than harm. Yeah. It's a mixed thing. Like at the end of the day now, when it's chaotic, they're usually just interacting and they're engaged and they're talking to one another, and it's really nice to see that rather than 20 zombies at the door staring at their phone, which is kind of that's been my impression for a long time. It's just this, you can just see this need and this desire to get back to the device, and who wants to be tethered to anything like that, other than philosophy and literature, of course.
Again, for our students, growing up in a heavily social media focused world, how do you feel like that's affected you and your peers' learning experience?
I think it's definitely made us all more distracted, and I can see that in myself as well. Like, especially when I used to use a lot more social media than I do now. It's just like it was always on my mind. Like I always wanted to just go on, like, say, TikTok or Instagram and just look at Reels or TikToks for hours on end, and it just like I just wasn't interested in doing anything else. And even when I do use it less currently, like if I'm trying to do some homework at home or something, like I have to hide my phone away from me so I don't see it, because then I'll immediately be distracted. And I feel like with social media, that's what's causing this. That's what's making us more distracted and causing us to have less focus, have shorter attention spans.
I do think that it has affected my learning experiences. There's in positives and negatives. I have found a lot of good tips, like group chats for helping with work and all these different techniques. But also my attention span is about that of a goldfish. It's I have 3 things going on at once in my room to even to feel entertained, and doing my homework, barely even do that because of my attention span. It's just so boring, and I just can't focus in.
Those external spaces become really desirable to us, and we feel like we can kind of curate this sort of sense of who we are in this nice little tidy sort of package, and life isn't really a nice tidy package. So we start to kind of devalue this experience we're having here, and we're putting all of our time and energy into this experience that's happening out there. And so we become totally disengaged from everything around us. And you can go to any restaurant and just see a couple in their phones rather than in conversation with each other. Or you can see that happening in the classroom. You see that happening everywhere you go. We're dealing with something that's powerfully addictive, right? And like any sort of addiction, it's hard to prioritize the things you ought to do or even the things you want to do over the thing you're addicted to.
I think that it's not just social media either, because I will see kids that are super addicted to games, or they're on YouTube, or they're watching shows in class. I'm like, what the heck? Are we not entertaining enough for you? But I think that kids don't know how to just be people. People don't know how to just be alone with their thoughts. I went to the doctor the other day, and I was sitting in the waiting room, and I always bring my book with me when I go to the waiting room, and every single person in the waiting room, older people too, were just on their phone scrolling, and I'm reading my book, and I was like, how weird that we, and even if I didn't have my book, I think it would be nice to just sit there and think and be bored. That's okay to be bored. You don't have to always be getting those hits of endorphins every single second, If kids don't have something to do, they'll turn and talk to each other, right? Or I know Miss Mack puts out crayons and art supplies, and she will not let them have their phone until the end of the period. She's like, and the kids are like, well, what are we gonna do? She's like, you can talk to someone, or you can do crafts, or you can read a book, or you can work on some other homework, or take a nap, or anything, but you don't need to always be on the phone. So yeah, I just think there's been more interaction with kids. And maybe to Evelyn's point, people that you didn't know, and you get to meet them, which kind of is your story from the coffee shop, Mr. Binkley.
Early on during this year, I had a student push back a little bit. I made it clear that I would let them know when they could have their phones back, and like Miss Mack, I would go till the end of the period. And she had her phone out, and she was looking at it, and I was like, well, what are you doing with your phone out? Like, the bell hasn't rung yet. And she's like, but we're not learning anymore. And I had to like process that because it made sense. I was like, okay, this is a good counter argument. Like, the instruction is done. And then the next day I talked to her and I just said, yeah, but there are other things to learn than the lesson. We can learn how to communicate with each other, maybe ask somebody sitting next to us like what middle school they went to, or do you have a cat, or something like that, anything. But
otherwise we can't be friends.
Otherwise we cannot be friends.
Okay.
I just want to add real quick, and this is something I've said to the faculty a lot, because we did a book study on Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, and the where we're coming from as teachers is not wanting you guys to like self-harm. And the research he conducted, not only did it show that academic results were plummeting, it was also just like the social and emotional well-being of young people was plummeting as well. So when I read this book, I was left with the impression that I kind of have like a moral responsibility to do something about this. Like, I wouldn't let any of my students harm themselves in any other way in my classroom. So once I learned that the extent to which the phones were harming them, I felt like I couldn't just stand there and watch them harm themselves. So I just think it's important for people to know that that's the place of concern that all of this is coming from. It's not like disciplinary and teachers trying to wield their power over young people or anything like that. And I hope that most students realize that and believe that. But yeah, it's just not wanting them to harm themselves and destroy themselves and wanting them to have a future. It's just like doing any other sort of intervention. If I knew that a student was engaging in harmful behaviors and they trusted me, I would try to have a conversation with them about that.
Overall, do we feel like the establishment of the cell phone policy has done more good than bad and should stay, or should it be adjusted, or should it just be taken away fully? This is just for everybody to answer.
I like it. I mean, as Sartu said, from the beginning, I was really strict, making sure it was in the bins every single day. Now I'm sort of letting my students self-manage. I've seen less cell phone use, I've seen more interaction with students, and I've seen a better turn-in rate. So, yeah, I think it's healthier for the kids, and I don't think that the kids are freaking out that they can't have their phone. All those issues that kids had at the beginning when they were saying things like, oh, I need to have my phone in case there's an emergency, or my phone might get broken. None of those have come true. Everyone, their fears have been assuaged, and I think we've kind of gotten into a routine where the kids know the expectations and they've been able to, roll with it, and it's been healthier for everybody.
I can only speak for myself. I think it's helped me a lot with finishing my schoolwork on time. I don't have as much homework because I'm actually doing things in class, but it's also kind of hard. I have a 504 plan that says that I can listen to music in class, and I'll have my phone on my desk, so I can I don't use it ever, but just to turn on and off songs. And there's been lots of teachers that have that are kind of stuck in their ways, and I've said I'm really sorry, I'll put it away, but I've been kicked out of class once because I put my phone away, but I kept my headphones in, and yeah, it's kind of been a struggle with that personally, but I think that it has helped me with doing my schoolwork. It's just caused some complications with my relationships with teachers.
I can see the change in the classrooms, but also just the mindset behind it itself. From this discussion, we can see it's trying to create more community, and I feel that's just such a good thing. There's no way I could see this policy in a bad light. I enjoy it.
I think it's a good first step. I don't think it's by any means complete, and I know that the district is looking at having a district-wide policy, which probably would be really helpful, because I think when there are inconsistencies from classroom to classroom, it just becomes really confusing for the students. So if there's a policy eventually, I guess what we have now is more of a protocol, but if there is a policy, an official policy, I think it'll be helpful to everyone, because there won't be any sort of misunderstandings as to what you are and are not allowed to do with your cell phone. So you should sell your phone, and you should get a skateboard, And you start going to the skate park, so you guys can.
No,
start
I
thinking
went.
about
I
it.
went. I just
Oh,
went
okay,
yesterday, and I'm
okay.
gonna try to get a new one
And
for
then
Christmas.
stop by
Okay.
Relevant and make some new packs.
Okay.
If you need a new skateboard, come talk to me. I might be able to hook you up because I have one that I don't ride anymore. So.
A Binkley skateboard.
Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Just ahead, CR News' Emmy McGill joins me on set to reflect on the district's cell phone policy and social media, as well as her article addressing the issue. That's next in 60 seconds. Welcome back. Joining me now on set is CR News editor and staff writer Emmy McGill. Thank you for coming on.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Of course. And as a student yourself, what is your perspective on the issue, and how has your experience writing on other matters of technological and district policy significance in regard to your recent articles informed that view?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of perks of having a stricter phone policy, and part of that is just the pressure of a social media presence. I mean, most students have their notifications on, whether it's the vibration or the sound, and every time you hear that, you get the urge to click, and you just keep clicking and keeping that persona. It's a lot of pressure. Everybody only puts their best self online, so keeping that up and keeping up with all of the comparison, it's really difficult. So taking that out of classrooms would be good. On the other hand, a lot of students are really concerned about it because a big issue that I've run into is that people are worried about contacting their families, especially in emergencies. But a big part of that is that brings up a bigger issue. If schools are needing to gain families' trust by improving communication and emergency procedures and things like that, that's not a reflection on the phones themselves, that's a reflection on other policies.
And in studying this issue, which you have a personal stake in, is there any form of consensus among students and staff alike as to whether cell phone policy is necessary? And what would stricter policies look like, and what would it require to implement them?
Yeah, so most staff that I've talked to are pretty pro a stricter policy, and students are at the very least apprehensive, if not strongly against it. But I think the biggest part is just communicating that having a stricter phone policy doesn't mean just taking phones away and having no access to them. Like when I was talking to Dr. Snell, it doesn't always have to look like that. It's more, as he said, it's an agreement between students and teachers and families of what's the expectation around it. And various phone policies on the stricter end could look like the phone pouches. Probably a lot of people have seen those online where they lock and a staff member would have to unlock them either at the end of class or at the end of the school day, depending on the policy. But sometimes that could just mean collecting them in class and only getting them if you need them for a specific thing, like if you have teacher permission to listen to music or another resource that would be only on your phone. So I think it really just depends. It's not, like I said earlier, with policies like this, it's not very clear cut, and it just depends on the person.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. That is our show for this Friday. I'm Elijah Guerin. Talan will be back after winter break to discuss recent vandalism and the broader issue of changing student behavior. So stay tuned for that. Enjoy your time off and have a happy holidays. As always, the conversation continues because here at CR News, the Rapids report.
Hey Rapids, thanks for helping us reach 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. If you haven't already, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the CRTV YouTube channel to support content for and by CR students. Thanks for watching.